This is a video for Flat Earth Perth, who lives in Australia, and Flat Earth NZ, who lives in New Zealand. And I really don't understand why they believe in a flat Earth, because the observed southern hemisphere sun orbit is impossible on a flat Earth. Now this is the model that they believe in. And on the flat Earth we have a sun that is parallel above the Earth, and it is orbiting around Polaris, or the North Pole. The problem is, I've been to the southern hemisphere and I've seen the sun orbit, and it is actually in the opposite direction of what it should be if we lived on a flat Earth. So let's explore this a little bit more. Here is a flat Earth map, and I think everybody agrees that during the course of the year the sun orbits between the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn, and on the equinoxes the sun is over the equator. Now down here we have Australia. I spent over a year in Australia, and to the right are the islands of New Zealand. I spent about 2 months in New Zealand. And what we're going to do is just take a look at a sun orbit from Sydney, Australia, which is down here, down in the southeast corner of Australia. Now here we have a side view of the flat Earth equinox sun orbit, which is of course over the equator. Now of course the flat earthers are going to say, what about perspective? Well, here is your perspective drawing, and of course I have perspective in parentheses, because if you really understood perspective you would be able to do angular size calculations. And if you are able to do angular size calculations, you know that on a flat Earth the sun would never set. The midnight sun would always be above the horizon. But I'll use this diagram because it's still not going to save the flat Earth. Now on the equinox, of course, we have a 12-hour day and we have a 12-hour night. So here we have sunrise in the east and we have sunset in the west. Now if we're in Sydney, Australia, we are to the south of that orbit. So it just is common sense that what we should see is a sun that is always to the north of us. But here is what you actually see in Sydney on the equinox. You have sunrise, which is to the east, and then the sun swings upward to the north or to your left, and then the sun continues to the left and downward to set in the west. And as you can see, this sun orbit is in the complete opposite direction of what it should be on a flat Earth. Now another thing to consider is that in the northern hemisphere you are within that orbit, and you do see a sun orbiting around you always to the right. And as you look to the west, the setting sun is heading north or to your right as it sets. In Sydney, it is in the complete opposite direction. The setting sun is heading to the left or towards the south. And we're going to watch a video now of this sunset. So you can see that the setting sun is heading downward towards the left, which is to the south. So if the Earth was flat, the sun should be orbiting around the North Pole, which is to the right, 8,550 miles from Sydney. And yet we see a sun orbit path that is actually in the complete opposite direction. Now flat earthers always tell me to trust your senses. Well, I am going to trust my senses because I clearly see an orbit path that does not work on a flat Earth. I'm going to show you another video. This is from Western Australia, another sunset, and I'll have links to both these videos in my description if you want to take another look at them. So again, the sun is heading downward to the left or towards the south. Impossible on a flat Earth. This is from suncalc.org, and what is nice about this is that it shows you the observed sun orbit during the course of a day. This is for Sydney, of course, for the 21st of March 2019, and it matches exactly what I saw. I saw the sun rising in the east, It swings to the north, to the left at noon. It continues left to set in the west. Now, anybody can measure these observations. It's quite easy to do if you understand how a compass works. Every place has a magnetic declination. For Sydney, it is plus 12 degrees or 12 degrees to the east. So all you need to do is get a compass and you align the needle so it's on the 12-degree east mark in Sydney. Now you know that north is aligned with true north. Very simple thing to do to double check these observations. Now here's another thing that needs to be considered, is that the sun has to return to the east. I've had some discussions with flat earthers, and many of them just seem to think that after sunset the sun just continues off into the west. Now think about it on the equinox. We have a 12-hour day. So from sunrise here in the east to sunset in the west is 12 hours. That means that the sun has 12 hours to get back to the east to rise again in the morning. And again, if you follow that orbit path during the day and continue it, the orbit path is going to be to the south at night as that sun returns to the east. Now here's another thing to look at. This is for Los Angeles. Los Angeles is almost the exact same latitude to the north that Sydney is to the south. They're just very close to each other in that regard. And look at this. The sun path is in the complete opposite direction. Here we have the sun rising in the east, and as you follow that sun during the day, you have to turn to your right as it goes to sunset at night. And again, if you continue that orbit path, in this case we do see a sun that is appearing to go to the north or around the North Pole. So this is how sun orbits work on the globe. If you look on the left here, we have east where the sun rises. The sun moves across the sky to the west for sunset. Now in the upper right in the northern hemisphere, as we look south, what we see is the sun moving across the sky from left to right. It is the complete opposite in the southern hemisphere. As you look to the north, we see the day sun moving from right to left. Let's compare this with actual observed sun orbits, and you can see that in Los Angeles we see a sun orbiting in this direction, which matches what we would expect to see on a globe. And in Sydney we see a sun orbiting in the complete opposite direction. Again, this matches what we would expect to see on a globe. So on the flat Earth on the right we have the sun orbit that is going from east to west as it orbits around the Earth. And this does match what we see in Los Angeles. We see a sun orbit that is heading in the same direction as the map on the right. But again, in the southern hemisphere we have an orbit in the complete opposite direction. It does not match what we would expect to see if the Earth was flat. So I have clearly shown that the observed sun orbit in the southern hemisphere does not support the flat Earth model. So if you live in the southern hemisphere, you believe in a flat Earth, and you see this sun orbit every day, why do you ignore this? As for me, I'm going to trust my senses because A, I know that this orbit does not support the flat Earth model, and B, I know that this orbit is easily explained by the globe model.